Hello, I'm April Schendel. Today we're going to be talking about the need for communication with families with diverse backgrounds. So we're going to be starting a little bit of a presentation here. Okay, so here's our first slide. Again, our title, Communication with Families of Diverse Backgrounds. So part of this assignment was to do a little bit of a deep dive on statements of diversity from around the metro area. I went ahead and investigated 5 different schools or districts. First, I started with Notre Dame de Sion, my own school, St. Teresa's Academy, which is another private all-girls Catholic school in Kansas City. Blue Valley Public Schools, these are located on the Kansas side of the Kansas City Metro, as well as Shawnee Mission School District, which is also on the Kansas side of the Metro, where my children attend, and then Kansas City Public Schools, which we'll be focusing on the Missouri side here. So I did link to each of these schools or districts websites to kind of take a look at their statements on diversity and what they have going on. We'll just take a look at a couple for now, but anybody who wants to dive a little bit deeper into this, these are linked right there for you. So here's Scion's. This is our vision, and here's our statement on diversity. And then we also went to St. Teresa's. Let it load here. And so there's their statement on equity and inclusion. And we're not going to read all these right here. We're going to just talk a little bit about what they said. Here's Blue Valley Public Schools. So they have quite a bit. And then we have Shawnee Mission. Quite detailed. Maybe that's why it's taking so long to load. Oh, there she goes. Okay. So one more, Kansas City Public Schools on the Missouri side. And theirs is by far the most extensive rather. So they went through quite a bit having to do with diversity and inclusion in their schools. So you don't have to go through all of that, and we won't do that together. Let's go ahead and close these out. But as you can see, there are some things that are going to be noted here on the next slide that they have in common. So every single one of these schools or districts do state their policies. If you want to go back and look at those websites, I invite you to do so. And then we can also see that every one of these schools does provide diversity training. Now, Blue Valley and Shawnee Mission Schools, as well as Kansas City, Missouri Public Schools, did have that clearly on their website. As far as Notre Dame de Sion, I know about that from personal experience, having gone through diversity training and some communication training at school. And then because of the close relationship that my school has with St. Teresa's, I do know that they are practicing that as well. Okay, so why do we need to learn to effectively communicate with diverse families? So I have this little graphic here that should kind of hopefully spread some light on that for us. So really, communication is the cornerstone for family involvement. And of course, family involvement goes to improve student outcomes. And it's all kind of this related cycle. So now we'll talk a little bit about the importance of providing training to faculty and staff on how to successfully communicate with families with diverse backgrounds. So families of diverse backgrounds have faced cultural, linguistic, and other barriers as they try to become involved in their children's education. These families are often highly represented in decisions made in schools and in family involvement activities. Some families may have difficulties establishing trust with institutions they perceive to be dominated by systems that have discriminated against them in the past. Cross-cultural communication can be even a little bit more difficult, but it can, of course, help us. With the fact that we have so many different languages spoken in the United States today, it can be pretty challenging. And then of course, communication is sometimes guided by some cultural assumptions and tendencies, and preferences can be related to cultural or community values, priorities, and commitments. So let's talk a little bit more about communication and its role in increasing family engagement and building trust. Effective communication can provide the opportunity to live out values and inclusiveness, fostering equity. It can develop effective partnerships between families and schools. It can build relationships. And then, of course, over time, trust is built, and that's based on the other party's actions as well as perceptions of one another's intentions, competence, and integrity. However, in spite of the research of benefits of effective communication with diverse families, many educators still struggle to find methods and strategies to support them. Learner outcomes and effective family engagement of students across backgrounds. So, decades of research has linked family involvement to higher student achievement. And again, this is for across all backgrounds. So students have been observed to earn higher grades and test scores and enroll in higher level programs. They're promoted, pass their classes, earn credits, attend school regularly, have better social skills, show improved behavior, and adapt well to school. Graduate and go on to post-secondary education. So there are some studies out there that I ran into in our research that talks about learner outcomes and effective family engagement of students with diverse backgrounds. So I wanted to mention a couple of those studies. One was done by Columbia University in 2017. So they sent weekly automated alerts to parents about their child's missed assignments, grades, and class absences. And they had some really wonderful results. 27% reduced course failures, 12% increased class attendance, and then they also had increased student retention. And then there was another study that was mentioned in our research by WestEd. They did not provide a date, but they used an app called Talking Points, multilingual family engagement platform. So it was a lot like texting, but it provided translations and what really helped jump over those language barriers. With the use of this, 87% of all parents provided or reported being more involved in their children's education, but it was 100% of non-English speaking parents who reported more family involvement. So let's talk about benefits of training for faculty and staff on how to successfully communicate with families with diverse backgrounds. So with proper training and support, successful communication with families with diverse backgrounds can help inform, reassure, and engage families in order to build trust. Effective family engagement, as we've said, contributes to improved student outcomes, and it can close persistent achievement gaps that exist among students of diverse backgrounds and family income levels. Culturally relevant family engagement strategies have shown that can show students that their family identities are understood and valued. And they can also demonstrate respect for families with a diverse range of backgrounds and structures. So how to successfully communicate with families with diverse backgrounds, where to start. The first thing you need to do, and that we should all do, is get to know communities from an asset-based approach. We want to also, of course, explore our own backgrounds and potential biases. And then another thing we can do right away is integrate families and communities into our curriculum. So you can use questionnaires, guest speakers, projects, family-based writing, anything that brings families into our classrooms. You want to vary your communication techniques. So here's a couple that you can think of. For digital, you can use talking points like we just mentioned. There's also Class Dojo, Spotlight, Seesaw, and then of course, good old fashioned text alerts. So those can be really, really effective. And then of course, there are traditional means as well, such as conferences, meetings, phone calls, notes home, or even journals that can be sent back and forth. But what you always want to keep in mind is to keep communication consistent and continuous, and you want to use a variety of methods to be able to reach all families. So here are some strategies for communicating effectively with families of students with diverse backgrounds. These strategies are something that you can keep in mind whether you are trying to communicate in person or using some kind of digital platform. So you want to always assume good intentions and approach all families as partners who want the best for their children. Recognize and respect differences in family structures. Bring a sense of self-reflectiveness and cultural humility to all conversations and interactions. Use inclusive terminology and materials. So you want to make sure and check everything that you send home for assumptions about anything about our students' backgrounds. You want to recognize key relationships. So this could be step parents or just some kind of other parent, family member that, or even maybe non-family member who's assuming the role of guardian. So maybe just say something like dear families instead of dear parents. You want to use home languages whenever that's possible. Be respectful of families' cultural and linguistic backgrounds when asking questions. Consider using ongoing informal opportunities to engage in conversations with families. Establish rapport with families before attempting to gather information with them, and use a variety of open-ended and closed-ended questions. So those were gathered from a couple of different places, and then we have a few more tips on the next slide. So all of these little kind of quick tips were taken from this website here, top 10 tips for effective cross-cultural communication. You see it cited down there. I've also linked it here because it was just really nice to keep in mind, I thought. So maintain etiquette. Maintain etiquette, of course. And remember that etiquette can vary across cultures. You want to always avoid slang. It can be really difficult for non-native speakers to understand, and it can even sometimes be confusing. You want to speak slowly, but not so slowly that you are going to seem patronizing. Also try to keep your language simple. Try using simpler words instead of busting out your best SAT words. Just try to just keep it simple. Practice active listening. Of course, take turns to talk. You want to write things down. This can be especially important with larger numbers or figures to avoid confusion. You want to avoid closed questions, although our last source said to use a variety, which I would probably lean toward personally. Be careful with humor. Humor can be really, really difficult to understand across cultures. So if you do use it, then just be mindful of what kind of jokes you are trying to integrate in your conversations. And then of course, be supportive. So we've got some references here. And there we go. Thank you so much for your time today. I hope this has convinced you to integrate communication training with diverse families into your school's curriculum.